This is Kutchers Run, Stage 3, 2.27 miles. And there's someone discovering we have a closed off road. Whoa, 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 whoa.
Okay.
Oh, somebody's pissed off. Sorry, lady. Sorry. Oh wow, check out the...
Yeah, I see it.
That's coming towards us too.
How's it going?
Hey, fun times.
57, right?
Yep.
Sure.
Thank you. 15. 10. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Go. Nice. 450. Stay left over crest 50. Right 5 plus cut over crest go. 350. Stay left over crest. There you go. 50. Right 5 plus cut over crest go. 350.
Ow.
Huh?
That's okay. No, nothing. 350, then what?
Small crest, right 6 plus, into a left 4 short, into turn left 2 plus, no cut. Left 4 short, into a left 2 plus, no cut. Go.
4 and then 2?
Yes. $400. This is shakedown. Stay left over flat crest, commit 50. Stay right over flat crest 150. Stay right over flat crest 100. Stay left over small crest 100. Jump 120. Right 5 plus long. And a left 5 minus long. Camber go 200. Very long small crest, into a caution small jump, into turn right 3 plus, camber loose. Repeat, turn right 3 plus, camber loose. 70. Small crest 50, left 6 plus 150, left 5 plus long, into a right 4. Into a very long crest, into finish. Into left 6 over small crest 100. Keep it in, do not lift. Left 6 over small crest 100. Done. Good job. Hey. Thank you. Thanks for working, guys.